better late than never. Hello, my name is Tyler Stans, and this is what's playing tonight. As we draw closer to Spider-Man No Way Home, it's important to remember how we got here in the first place. After tackling the Sam Raimi-Tobey Maguire trilogy, it's time to talk about Sony's first attempt at a Spider-Man reboot. Yes, only 7 years after the travesty that was Spider-Man 3, we were graced with not a sequel, but a complete reboot. No more Tobey, no more Kirsten, no more James, no more cheesy New York. No. Sony was restarting everything with a hip, young, new Spider-Man. In 2012's The Amazing Spider-Man, directed by the appropriately named Mark Webb, we are introduced to our new Peter Parker, Andrew Garfield. This Peter was a nerd, a loser, a scientist, and a radical skateboarder. Peter now had web shooters and an updated costume to differentiate it from the last series. Instead of Mary Jane, they opted to have Gwen Stacy, portrayed by Emma Stone, as the main love interest. And unlike MJ, Gwen was a scientist and even smarter than Peter. She also differed from MJ by not being a damsel in distress and actually even assisting Peter on multiple occasions. Gwen worked for Oscorp, although we wouldn't see any Osborns at first. It was also decided that this fresh new Spider-Man would need a fresh new villain. That villain is Curt Connors, portrayed by Rhys Ifans, a character who had a minor role in the Raimi trilogy, much more prominent in The Amazing Spider-Man. Curt Connors is a scientist who turns himself into the classic Spidey baddie, the Lizard. The Lizard is portrayed entirely by CGI. I'm not sure if they use motion capture or not. I didn't look it up. But Curt Connors' main motivation is he, I think, lost a limb in a war or during military service, I guess. So he is trying to splice his DNA with lizard DNA to sort of acquire the regeneration powers of a lizard, grow his arm back. It goes terribly wrong, and he turns himself into a giant lizard. But Curt Connors isn't just another scientist. He actually has ties to Peter's past. And that's right. Along with Uncle Ben and Aunt May, played by Martin Sheen and Sally Field respectively, we get to see Peter's actual parents this time. Campbell Scott and Embeth Davids play Richard and Mary Parker, who leave Peter with his aunt and uncle at a young age and then disappear. And because it's all connected, in this series, Richard Parker is also an Oscorp scientist who worked with Connors on spider genetics or something. Cross-species DNA splicing, it's a major plot point in this movie. So as you can tell, The Amazing Spider-Man is quite different from the original Spider-Man movie from 2002, except for the parts that aren't. You still get Peter getting bitten, you still get Uncle Ben being shot and killed in cold blood, you still get Peter acting irresponsibly, which leads him to learning the lesson that with great power comes great responsibility. It's actually shocking how similar this movie is to Sony's original version, almost to the point that I think it comes across as kind of pointless. Now, that was a little harsh. This movie does do some good things. I feel like The Amazing Spider-Man has an actual plot compared to the original. In the original, you get the origin story and then snippets of things happening until the final battle with the Green Goblin and Spider-Man. In this movie, the origin pretty much is the plot, and it takes up the entire runtime. Peter never actually finds the guy who killed Uncle Ben and has only been Spider-Man for a little bit by the end of the movie. I would maybe retitle this movie to The Unmemorable Spider-Man, because aside from the things I talked about already, I can't remember anything that happens in this movie. Even the score by the late James Horner isn't nearly as memorable as Danny Elfman's. If you played it for me right now, I wouldn't be able to recognize it. I will give credit where credit is due. The acting and writing is a lot better than Spider-Man and Spider-Man 3. Garfield, Stone, and Ifans give excellent performances, but overall, The Amazing Spider-Man is just kind of fine. I give it 2 out of 4 ties. It's really just nothing special to me. But don't worry, they made another one. Now, I hope you guys are ready for what might be my hottest take ever. It's only taken 7 years, but I think I've come around on The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This is a widely hated movie, and it's understandable why. Much like with Spider-Man 3, Sony tried to cram as much nonsense as they possibly could into this movie. We go from the modest one villain in the first movie to suddenly 3 villains. Sony had also become very aware of how successful Marvel Studios had become, and they wanted to try their own hand at universe building. There are very clear signs in this movie that point to the Sinister Six. It was originally planned out so that they would get their own movie. At the time, I thought this was all a mistake. But nowadays, I almost would have liked to have seen what they could have come up with. I even remember them having plans for some sort of Aunt May movie, and I think that would have been a real mistake. But obviously what happened, and we never got to see any of that. So I'm just going to start with the negatives of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and I'm going to be probably saying a lot of things that a lot of people have already said. Jamie Foxx is terrible in this movie until he finally becomes Electro, and I don't even think it's his fault. Electro starts off as this real loser guy who just wants to be noticed, and trying to make Jamie Foxx not look cool is an incredible task, and I don't think they nailed it, and that's why I think the performance is bad. Jamie Foxx is just too cool. I don't buy him as a loser. It was odd casting, not really odd casting. It was an odd writing decision, because I think when he finally turns into Electro, he gives a much better performance. But him playing nerdy Maxwell Dillon at the beginning of the movie, I just didn't buy it. Dane DeHaan, famous for Chronicle, has the opposite problem. He starts off fine with a believable friendship with Peter. He also did a decent job at selling Harry's desperation towards saving his own life. But once Harry starts going full villain, his performance gets really bad. It's just so over the top and cheesy, and the design for his Green Goblin is terrible. And the contrivances that lead to him becoming the Goblin are so telegraphed and perfectly placed that it really takes me out of the movie. He's certainly no Willem Dafoe. Paul Giamatti is atrocious as the Rhino. But the Rhino has always sucked, so I guess it's not that big of a deal. Well, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about why this movie isn't quite as bad as I initially thought. The character moments. Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone have a chemistry that is far stronger than any of the relationships in the previous Spider-Man movies. This is true in the first Amazing Spider-Man movie as well. The two of them sell every scene that they share together. Even apart, Andrew Garfield acts the hell out of every scene that he's in. There are nice moments of just good acting throughout this movie. Peter's various relationships with Gwen, May, and even Harry are well acted and well written. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 also has some of the best action scenes and special effects in the whole series. There was never a moment where I thought the CGI looked bad or dated. Even I would say that the CGI is on par with Homecoming and Far From Home. Now, I might retract that statement when I look at those movies, but just going off of memory, that's what I'm saying right now. Hans Zimmer replaces James Horner as the composer. It's not Zimmer's best work. The themes for Spidey and the Peter-Gwen scenes are fantastic, but the weird piece that plays during Electro scenes with the bizarre whisper chanting, I could have lived without that one. It's really strange. Look it up if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, because it is a vibe. It's not my vibe, but it is a vibe. I really think that the emotional moments land really well in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The death of Gwen Stacy is something that shook the comic book world, and I think this movie makes good on that. Gwen's death in this movie is so brutal that it makes me physically uncomfortable every time I hear that thud when her head hits the ground. And the aftermath of the death, with Andrew's portrayal of Peter's grief, it's heartbreaking. My eyes even got a little watery as I was watching this time. If I can give Amazing Spider-Man 2 anything over the first one, it's that it's not boring and it's not forgettable. I cannot believe what I'm saying here, but The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a better movie than the first one. So, with that being said, I give The Amazing Spider-Man 2 3 out of 4 ties. So just because I don't think I've pissed enough people off yet, I thought it'd be fun to start ranking these movies as I go on, in descending order. So I have Spider-Man 2 at number 1. I have The Amazing Spider-Man 2 at number 2. And then I have Spider-Man, the original, at number 3. And yeah, that's Spider-Man 3 at number 4. It's probably a controversial list, but this is my show. And I'll update the rankings with the Tom Holland movies when we get there. So let me know in the comments how wrong I am about everything I just said, or give me your own hot takes. Thank you so much for watching this video. You guys are all the best. Sorry it took so long to get this out. If you liked the video, consider clicking the like button. If you like me, how about subscribing? I'd really appreciate it, and I'd love to see you come back for the next video. I'm Tyler Stans, and this has been What's Playing Tonight.